Welcome back to Rare Coins Numix. From overlooked change to auction block legend, these are the rare US dimes that turned ordinary coins into extraordinary treasures. Make sure to watch till the end, because one of these could still be hiding in your pocket right now. It was the year 1967. The United States stood at a crossroads of culture, politics, and change. The country was in the thick of the Vietnam War, the civil rights movement was at full throttle, and there was a quiet revolution taking place inside pockets and purses, the revolution of American coinage. Amid all this, an unassuming coin, the Roosevelt dime, was quietly being struck by the millions. But this wasn't just any dime. It was the 1967 dime, a coin that, decades later, would surprise collectors and historians alike, not because of its silver sheen or artistic flourish, but because of something it lacked. A mint mark. To most people, a dime is simply a piece of metal, 10 cents, quickly forgotten at the bottom of a bag or jingling between couch cushions. But to those who truly understand the story of coins, every detail matters. In the case of the 1967 dime, the absence of a mint mark is where the story begins. That small detail, or the lack thereof, would be the root of intrigue, mystery, and eventually, significant monetary value. At first glance, the dime appears ordinary. On its obverse, the familiar profile of President Franklin D. Roosevelt stares solemnly to the left, a symbol of leadership during times of war and peace. Below his neck, the simple inscription, Liberty. To the left, the motto, In God We Trust, etched carefully into the metal. And to the right, the year, 1967. It looks like any other Roosevelt dime, and to the casual observer, that's all it is. But to the trained eye, there's one feature conspicuously absent: no small letter beneath the date, no D for Denver, no S for San Francisco. Just the year, standing alone. Why would the United States Mint decide to omit the mint mark? The answer lies in a period of upheaval that started in the early 1960s. The nation was facing a severe coin shortage. Silver coins were vanishing from circulation at an alarming rate. People had realized that the intrinsic value of the metal was beginning to exceed the face value of the coin itself, so they started hoarding them. Banks were running dry. Store clerks were short on change. The mint, scrambling to meet demand, had to find a solution. The response was drastic. First, the composition of coins changed. The Roosevelt dime, once made of 90% silver, was replaced with a copper-nickel-clad version beginning in 1965. This new sandwich of metals retained the silvery appearance but dramatically reduced production costs. It was the end of an era for American coinage, and a new, more practical one was ushered in. Then, a second measure was introduced: the removal of mint marks from all coins minted between 1965 and 1967. The reasoning was strategic. If collectors couldn't distinguish between coins from different mints, they would be less inclined to hoard them. Every coin would look the same, making it harder for collectors to target specific issues. It was a psychological tactic, and for a time, it worked. Mint marks were removed, and millions of coins poured into circulation, indistinguishable from one another. At least, that was the idea, but no decision in coinage is ever truly without consequence. In stripping away the mint marks, the mint inadvertently created a new niche for future collectors, one defined not by what was visible, but by what was missing. And among these no mint mark coins, the 1967 dime began to take on a life of its own. In the decades that followed, collectors began to pay closer attention to the coins minted during this mysterious, markless period. While most 1967 dimes were indeed common, something strange began to happen. Stories emerged of rare varieties, unusual minting errors, and coins in pristine condition that commanded premium prices at auctions. The value of some examples began to rise, slowly at first, then dramatically. And among these, a singular dime, one that appeared to be just another coin from 1967, stunned the numismatic world by being appraised and sold for a staggering $155,000. How could this happen? How could a 10-cent piece, produced in the millions and designed to be ordinary, reach such a phenomenal value? The answer lies in a combination of rarity, condition, and historical significance. One example of the 1967 dime was found to be in flawless condition, what collectors call mint state, graded MS-68 or even higher. Not only that, but this dime exhibited a full strike with extraordinary detail. In particular, the horizontal bands on the torch on the reverse side, known as full bands, were deeply and cleanly impressed, something rare for this year. Up next in the story of this remarkable coin is the hidden truth that even among hundreds of millions, rarity can be born not from intentional design but from the smallest imperfections. It's easy to overlook how a coin, designed to be mundane and mass-produced, could ever find itself bathed in the spotlight of high-stakes auctions. But with the 1988 D dime, the truth lies in those fleeting moments inside the mint, where machines meet metal, and fractions of a second determine whether a coin is ordinary or exceptional. A small portion of the 1988 D dimes possess mint errors that were completely unintentional, errors caused by die clashes, misalignments, double strikes, and off-center impressions. While these errors may seem like flaws to the average person, in the world of numismatics, they can turn a dime into a treasure. Collectors don't just seek perfection, they seek uniqueness. And when uniqueness is tied to historical context and scarcity, the value grows exponentially. There's one tale in particular that still sends a ripple through coin collecting communities, a discovery made at a local flea market. A coin dealer sorting through a bundle of overlooked change spotted what appeared to be a pristine 1988 D dime. On closer inspection, it was clear this wasn't just any coin. It displayed the sharpest of details, mirror-like surfaces, and full torch bands on the reverse, those elusive, finely struck lines that coin enthusiasts dream of. It had never been in circulation, and there were no signs of wear. It would go on to be professionally graded at MS-68 with full bands, placing it in the absolute upper echelon of known examples. This was the coin that would eventually be valued at an astounding $147,000. But even before that sale, whispers of the 1988 D dime's potential began to spread. People started paying more attention to their spare change. Coin forums lit up with speculation and questions. Could there be more out there? Was this coin a fluke, or part of a much smaller population than previously assumed? Some collectors, driven by passion and curiosity, began combing through old jars, estate sales, and coin rolls from banks in hopes of striking silver, or in this case, copper-nickel gold. The fact that such a coin was discovered not in a museum or mint archive, but in everyday circulation, or close to it, speaks volumes about the hidden value that may still exist right beneath our noses. Every now and then, a moment comes that redefines the worth of something so commonplace that it's usually ignored. And the 1988 D dime did exactly that. As the story continues, collectors start to realize that this isn't just about the coin's condition or its errors. The coin also represents a specific point in the American monetary timeline. In 1988, the U.S. was experiencing a period of transition, Reaganomics, growing inflation concerns, and increasing interest in preserving national heritage. Coins minted during these years subtly reflect the era in which they were produced. They're time capsules made of metal and minted in the millions, yet each tells a different story depending on how it's aged, how it struck, and who finds it. What sets the $147,000 1988 D dime apart isn't just rarity, it's resonance. It captures the collector's fantasy, a common coin elevated to legend through a perfect storm of preservation, error, timing, and rediscovery. The owner of the high-value dime didn't inherit a fortune, they uncovered it. And perhaps that's the most thrilling part, knowing that anyone, even a casual observer, might stumble across one of these numismatic anomalies in the most mundane of places. Coins like this ignite the imagination because they remind us that value isn't always where you'd expect it. The most expensive dimes aren't always encrusted in jewels or kept behind glass. Sometimes, they sit quietly in a drawer, waiting for someone to see them for what they truly are. And sometimes, all it takes is a keen eye and a bit of luck to turn a 10-cent piece into a six-figure prize. Now, as our story of the 1988 D Roosevelt dime continues, we begin to understand that coin collecting isn't merely a hobby, it's a form of historical discovery. Each coin becomes a puzzle, and every detail, from the depth of a strike to the placement of a mint mark, becomes a clue. It's in this deep appreciation for the micro that we find the macro, a glimpse into how value is made, remembered, and rewarded, and that brings us closer to our reveal, how one single 1988 D dime, no bigger than your thumbnail, found its way from the Denver Mint's machinery to a valuation that rivals the price of a luxury car, a college degree, even a small house. But before we make that final leap, let's explore just a little more about how coins like this become lightning rods for attention. The 1997 Roosevelt 1 dime P might seem like one of the most unremarkable coins to ever pass through your fingers. But that's exactly where its story begins, because sometimes, it's the most ordinary-looking things that hide the greatest surprises. You wouldn't expect to find anything extraordinary in a handful of coins you got from a gas station cashier. But imagine if tucked between the quarters and nickels, there was one dime that, under the right light, held secrets no one had seen before. This particular dime, struck in 1997 at the Philadelphia Mint, hence the small, P mint mark just beside Roosevelt's neck, was born into a world of volume, not exclusivity. The Mint didn't just produce millions of these dimes. It produced hundreds of millions. They were everywhere. So how could one coin from such a massive crowd ever be worth more than $100,000? To answer that, you have to start by understanding the Roosevelt dime series itself. It's one of the most consistent and unchanging coin series in modern U.S. history. Introduced in 1946, the design has barely changed. Franklin D. Roosevelt's left-facing portrait on the obverse, the Torch of Liberty flanked by olive and oak branches on the reverse, these elements are part of the national visual memory. We've seen them so many times, they've become background noise, and yet, in 1997, for reasons that would only become clear years later, something extraordinary happened at the Philadelphia Mint. Amid hundreds of millions of average dimes, a small handful were struck with such perfection, such intense detail, and such immaculate surfaces that they defied what was considered possible from modern minting. One of these dimes would later surface, not in a vault, not in a bank archive, but in a private collection where it had quietly sat, unrecognized for its rarity. The coin, at first, didn't even look special. But under magnification, it became clear that it had been struck with a fresh, clean die, one that had not yet been worn down by repetition. The result was a stunning, high-relief image. The texture of Roosevelt's hair, the sharp cut of the jawline, the subtle spaces within the lettering, all of it jumped out with striking clarity. On the reverse, the full horizontal lines that wrap around the torch, what numismatists refer to as full bands, were not just visible. They were perfect. Deep, unbroken, fully formed. What made this coin truly shocking was not just the strike quality, it was the condition. This was not a dime that had been handled, circulated, or used. It was pristine, with untouched luster and no signs of wear, scratches, or bag marks. It was as if time had simply skipped over it. Eventually, the coin made its way to a grading service, where it was evaluated by experts with decades of experience. And that's when the whispers began. Mint State 68. Full bands. One of one known at the time. A unicorn among dimes. The sort of modern-era perfection that coin collectors spend lifetimes chasing and often never find. That it didn't take long for news to spread. Collectors who had never looked twice at 1990s dimes began pulling out old rolls, flipping through albums, inspecting every Roosevelt dime they'd once considered worthless. But nothing came close. The 1997 Roosevelt 1 dime P that had been graded MS68FB was a one-of-a-kind. And when it finally hit the auction block, after weeks of anticipation, the bidding war wasn't just enthusiastic, it was explosive. The final hammer price was $112,000 for a dime. 10 cents, transformed into a six-figure artifact of American minting history. It was the kind of outcome that forced people to rethink what a modern coin could be worth. It shattered the assumption that only old coins, or coins made from gold or silver, could command such high values. This was clad. Modern. Common in theory, but impossibly rare in execution, and what made it even more extraordinary was that the coin wasn't marked as a special edition. It wasn't a proof. It wasn't made for collectors. It was a circulation strike, meant for everyday use. Meant to be spent on candy or meters or tossed in a drawer and forgotten, but fate had another idea. This was the dime that escaped all of that. It skipped the scratch of vending machines, the friction of jean pockets, the careless toss into tip jars. It slipped through the cracks of time and ended up preserved so perfectly that when the world finally saw it for what it was, it had become something entirely different. This wasn't just a dime. It was a miracle of timing, condition, and precision. Up next, let's dive into the story of a seemingly ordinary coin, the 2001 Roosevelt 1 dime with the D mint mark, that turned heads in the numismatic world and became the star of an incredible coin-collecting tale. When you think of the Roosevelt dime, it's easy to overlook it. After all, this dime has been a staple of American coinage since 1946, circulating endlessly in everyday transactions. But not all dimes are created equal, and sometimes, among the vast sea of ordinary coins, one can stand out as an unexpected gem. In 2001, the Denver Mint struck a massive quantity of dimes, like it does every year. The process was, as always, routine. Yet, hidden within this vast production, a small number of these dimes were struck with a level of precision and clarity that would later prove to be extraordinary. These dimes would go on to be some of the rarest, most sought-after coins in modern numismatics. And the 2001 D. Roosevelt 1 dime would emerge as the centerpiece of this rare group, capturing the fascination of collectors everywhere. What made this dime so special wasn't any flashy commemorative design or limited edition release. No, it was the combination of an impeccable strike and pristine condition, a pairing that would make any seasoned coin collector take a second look. The dimes from the Denver Mint were meant for circulation, intended to be spent in stores, used for pocket change, or exchanged countless times in daily commerce. But fate had other plans for one particular coin, which managed to escape the rigors of circulation entirely, remaining untouched and in perfect condition. This particular 2001 D dime was graded with an incredible Mint State 68, a nearly perfect grade on the scale that numismatists use to evaluate coins. Mint State 68 is a designation reserved for coins that exhibit only the most minute imperfections, and often, even those imperfections are barely visible under magnification. This dime wasn't just any high-grade coin, it was one of the finest examples of the series. Its surfaces were flawless, its edges sharp, and its details strikingly clear. The full bands on the reverse, a defining feature of the coin, were perfectly struck, further increasing its appeal to collectors who recognize the importance of this detail. To understand just how rare this 2001 D dime truly was, consider that the United States Mint produced billions of dimes in 2001, but very few of them would ever come close to the quality of this one. In fact, this dime's pristine condition made it stand out from its peers. It was an exceptional coin, one that had somehow avoided the usual wear and tear of circulation, escaping the scratches, dents, and discoloration that are common in everyday coins. It was like finding a diamond in a rough, massive mine of pebbles. When it was finally graded by professional services, the coin's condition became its ticket to fame. The Mint State 68 grade was a mark of excellence in the world of coin collecting. And with that grade came something else: value. The 2001 D. Roosevelt dime, once regarded as a common coin, had suddenly become one of the most highly coveted and expensive modern dimes ever known. The value of this coin wasn't just based on its scarcity or condition, but also on its appeal to a very specific group of collectors. These collectors weren't just looking for coins to fill out their albums, they were looking for pieces of history, for the best examples of American coinage that could exist. And this dime had become one of those pieces. Its value was set to rise dramatically, as bidders fought to claim it as the crown jewel of their collections. When the coin was finally auctioned, the bidding started fast and fierce. It didn't take long before the price began climbing to astonishing heights. The competition was intense, with collectors and investors from around the world placing bids, all eager to own this nearly flawless piece of numismatic art. As the auction progressed, the price reached incredible levels, far surpassing the expectations of even the most optimistic appraisers. When the dust settled, the coin had been sold for a staggering $42,000, an amount that would have been unimaginable for most dimes that year. For some, this sale was a revelation. It was a reminder that value doesn't always come from age or precious metals. Sometimes, it's about rarity, condition, and timing. This 2001 D. Roosevelt dime was a product of its time, and yet, it had transcended its original purpose to become a treasure in its own right. And the buyer who walked away with this coin wasn't just investing in a dime, they were investing in a symbol of what could be hidden in plain sight. the remarkable thing about the 2001 Roosevelt dime isn't just its price tag. It's the story it tells. It's the story of how something as simple as a dime, something you could easily find in your pocket or on the street, can hold untold value if you know where to look. It reminds us that even in a world dominated by modern minting techniques and mass production, there's still magic to be found. Whether it's an unassuming coin from a vast mintage or a tiny error on a commonly circulated piece, the world of numismatics always holds surprises for those willing to seek them out. Up next, let's explore the fascinating story of the 2016 USA 1 dime with the P mint mark, a coin that captivated the attention of collectors and investors alike. This seemingly ordinary dime, struck with the Philadelphia mint mark, would ultimately rise in value and rarity, becoming a symbol of how something small and overlooked can evolve into a sought-after treasure. To understand the significance of the 2016 P dime, we first need to take a step back in time, to the early days of American coinage, and reflect on the importance of the dime itself. A coin often found in pockets, purses, and change jars, it might seem like one of the least exciting pieces of currency. However, it has a history filled with change, innovation, and symbolic meaning. From the design created in 1946 by John R. Sinek, which honors President Franklin D. Roosevelt, to the ongoing importance of the coin in everyday American life, the dime is much more than its size or face value suggests. The 2016 release, however, would be different. For the first time in over 75 years, the United States Mint made a bold decision: it would include a mint mark on the dime that had never been seen before in the coin's long history. Philadelphia, the birthplace of the nation's first mint, had struck dimes in the past, but for decades, it had been the Denver and San Francisco mints that took the lion's share of the production. In 2016, the Philadelphia Mint added the P mint mark to this dime, signifying its origin in a bold move that would soon shake up the numismatic community. The coin's design remained true to the familiar Roosevelt profile. On the obverse, President Roosevelt's dignified image gazes left, surrounded by the words, "Liberty, in God we trust," and the year, 2016. The design symbolized Roosevelt's enduring legacy as the 32nd President of the United States, especially his leadership through the Great Depression and World War II. However, this dime also carried a new level of attention and excitement due to the significance of the P mint mark. The introduction of the mint mark, which hadn't appeared on a dime since the 1940s, created a stir in the collecting world. Collectors were eager to get their hands on one of these new coins, particularly because of the novelty factor. After all, the mint mark on the 2016 dime was an important shift in U.S. mint history, marking the first time in decades that the P mint mark had graced this denomination. However, as with all coins, the real value would not just come from the mint mark but from the quality and rarity of the individual examples that would survive the trials of circulation. This is where the magic of the 2016 P dime lies. Like so many great numismatic finds, it was a combination of rarity, chance, and timing that made it special. In the grand scheme of things, the 2016 P dime was released in a year of relatively high mintage. The Philadelphia Mint produced hundreds of millions of these coins, which, in most cases, would be sent to banks, exchanged by people in their daily transactions, and eventually worn down by the wear and tear of circulation. In fact, most dimes are simply spent, forgotten, or swapped out for newer versions. But every now and then, a coin survives that process. Some escape the hustle and bustle of commerce altogether, ending up stashed away in mint rolls or collections, untouched by the passage of time. It's these survivors that make all the difference. A few years after the coin was minted, a curious pattern began to emerge. Among the dimes produced at the Philadelphia Mint that year, a very small number had an exceptionally high quality, much higher than what was typical for a mass-produced coin. These dimes weren't just well-struck, they were pristine, flawless, and immaculate. Grading services like the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, NGC, and Professional Coin Grading Service, PCGS, began to receive these dimes for certification, and what they found surprised many. This small group of 2016 P dimes exhibited characteristics that elevated them far beyond the typical mint-state dimes of the era. They showed off impeccable details, with razor-sharp strikes and virtually no flaws or imperfections. It was rare enough to find a coin of such a modern vintage in such pristine condition, but when you factor in that this was a dime, one of the most commonly circulated coins in the country, the rarity increased exponentially, then came the grading process. Coins like these, given the highest grades by the professional grading services, achieved a special status in the coin collecting community. Grading is a highly precise and meticulous process, and a dime achieving a high-grade designation, such as MS-69 or even MS-70, becomes a near-mythical example of perfection. As collectors clamored for these flawless examples, the demand for 2016 P dimes with exceptional grades grew. And when one such coin finally came to auction, the price skyrocketed. When that remarkable 2016 P dime was sold, the winning bid was nothing short of extraordinary. Collectors and investors who recognized the rarity of such a coin began to push the price higher and higher, with fierce competition among bidders eager to secure this rare gem. The value of the 2016 P dime quickly exceeded expectations, with the coin fetching an amount far beyond the face value of 10 cents, marking it as one of the most coveted modern dimes in the numismatic world. For most people, this would be a mind-blowing price for a dime. After all, we're talking about a coin with a face value of just 10 cents. But in the world of numismatics, it's a reminder that value isn't just about what the coin is made of, it's about its history, its rarity, and the circumstances that lead to its discovery. A perfect 2016 P dime wasn't just a coin, it was a piece of history, a symbol of a moment when a mint mark from the past made its triumphant return to one of America's most iconic coins.